You're listening to Murder Not Murdering with Erin,
And Autumn,
a true crime podcast about murder and murdering.
but we are not murderers.
And we are back at Murder Not Murdering with Erin, and Autumn's here this week.
I'm
Uh,
back,
Thanks for your patience and listening to a solo episode by me last week.
which was
Um,
wonderful. I loved it.
Thank you. Autumn and I have been talking a lot this week about everything that's happening with the Savannah Guthrie mother kidnapping.
Nancy Guthrie.
Yeah, Nancy.
Mhm.
We've been talking about it a lot because obviously it's all over the news right now, and we just don't have a lot of information. It sounds like there is some sort of ransom notes, but none have been verified yet. Sounds like suspicious circumstances. They've had forensic teams there. It's just kind of crazy.
Well, there's a timeline too into the disappearance. Just to put it out there because I know we have a lot of people who listen in Arizona.
Mhm.
On January 31st at 5:32 PM, Nancy goes to a local family's home. At 9:48 PM, the family drops Nancy off at home and the garage door opens. And then on February 1st at 1:47 AM, the doorbell camera disconnects. At 2:12 AM, the software detects a person on camera, but no video is available because they don't have a subscription. And then 2:28 AM, her pacemaker app disconnected from her phone.
That's the part that gets me. I mean,
Mhm.
I know she was away from her phone, but it
She was away
still
from her phone.
still
And then
makes me nervous.
at 11:56 AM, the family checked on Nancy. At 12:03 PM, the family calls the police, and at 12:15 PM, the police arrive. And from what I saw today in the press conference, they are hopeful, the police are, that she is alive.
Yes. I mean, I am hopeful. It sounds like this feels like a real ransom moment, right?
Mhm, it does. It feels like somebody is
It's a
holding her for ransom.
it's a very I was saying this to Josh yesterday. I just think it's an odd target. You know what? Of all the people in the world to pick, it just seemed like an odd target. I
Well, I
mean,
feel
this
like they
clearly
think
had
that she's
this
easy.
wasn't yeah, but this wasn't just like a kidnapping of convenience. This had to have taken lots of planning.
Yes, I feel like, or maybe it didn't. Maybe people were really desperate and they didn't have a lot of planning, so now they're scrambling to figure out how to get what they want out of it.
Without getting caught,
Mhm,
which
and the family released a very heartbreaking video.
oh
Oh
my
my gosh.
god, it made me cry.
I think, we will share it on Murder Not Murdering, the link from Savannah, so that people can watch it as well. It's just very my heart goes out to her.
Oh my gosh. I literally Josh and I watched it together on the news, we were both, like, tearing up just seeing their raw emotion and can't imagine what they're going through right now and how scary this is and just not knowing, and it's just so senseless that it's just terrible, and she does have, a heart condition, and she does need medication and
Yeah, she
all of
does need
that.
medicine.
So, it is important, and time is of the essence of getting her back. So, it's
It's like
just
right now, it's like a kidnapping, but if you keep her and she dies, it's murder.
that exactly. Exactly, because you were withholding.
It's like
This
you
is
should definitely make that choice to bring her home.
yeah. And hopefully she does get home, and we'll continue to update you guys if you are not seeing what's going on, and if you are, I know we have a lot of listeners that are abroad right now, so this is, a journalist, that's on the
The
Today
Today
Show,
Show. Mhm.
and her mother was kidnapped, just for a quick little backstory on I know not everybody lives nearby and is seeing this, but it's just just a wild thing to happen, and to me, it just felt so random, both in the celebrity um, and everything. I just was shocked by it, and God, the family, it's just absolutely heart-wrenching.
So, so, so sad.
Yep, and I know that Savannah was, I believe, supposed to go to the Olympics, and she's not going to be there to report now, um, with everything going on. Obviously, she's gonna be at home. But one thing that they did mention in their when they were, released that video was the fact that the AI can now you can make a video of someone that looks like they're really talking to you using their voice, disguising, a picture, or you can manipulate things. So that side of things has really changed. You and I talk about kidnappings often on this podcast, but that's really changed the way we see things. Before, if they wanted a proof of life, someone would have to hold a newspaper up in the picture or something like that so you knew that they were still alive. But now all of that can be manipulated. So, how can you
Mhm.
trust that the video or the photo that you're seeing is really them? It's just crazy.
100%.
It's just crazy to me, and I just find it so shocking. And hopefully, she'll be found alive, and this will just be a really awful thing that happened, but, she'll come through it, and all we can do is hope, right?
Mhm. I mean, like, if you're listening or if you know anything, please just do the right thing.
Yes. Please do the right thing, and, keep your eyes out. All of our listeners in Arizona or neighboring states, keep your eyes peeled because you just never know when someone's gonna see something and go, "Oh, you know what? That actually makes me think of something." Actually, that's in my case tonight, where
Ooh.
a bystander helps crack a case. So, you never know. You never know what's gonna happen. Um, Again, thanks for listening to my case last week. That was, one that I've wanted to do for a while, and, if you did get a chance to go to our Instagram, you would see that infamous photo was in there. I know we'll get flagged for having a dead body, but she was technically still alive being electrocuted in that photo. Anyway, if you so technically in that chair, she is technically being electrocuted in the moment. So, if you haven't listened to the episode, take a listen to the last episode with Ruth Snyder. I think we're going to probably start jumping right in. I'm going to have Autumn go first this week since y'all listened to me last week. I don't know why I said y'all.
I was waiting for that. I was like,
I'm a
where's she
northern
going with
woman.
that?
No offense to my
We'll say,
southern listeners.
"Y'all, y'all."
No offense to our southern listeners, but, that's just not in my regular vocab. So
No, it's not.
so that's something new, something that just
We love
randomly
it.
yeah,
We love
keeping it
it.
interesting. So Autumn's gonna go first since, again, you all listened to me last week, and let's hear what you got this week, Autumn.
Okay. I am just gonna go right into it because if I say too much, then I'll give away too much.
I hate when that happens. I always want a silly kind of not silly, but I want a title that's gripping, and sometimes it all just goes away. Like, it all is given away.
Yes. Okay. So, this is Brandon Swanson, the night he vanished. There's a particular kind of confidence that comes with being young. Not arrogance, just certainty. The certainty that you know where you are, that you'll figure it out, that everything is fine, even when it very clearly isn't. And most of the time, that confidence is rewarded. You make it home, you laugh about it later, it becomes a story you tell. But sometimes it doesn't. This is the story of Brandon Swanson. Brandon Swanson was 20 years old. He was a college student at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, studying wind turbines. He was very smart, responsible, close with his parents, Annette and Brian. The kind of kid who checked in, the kind of kid who wouldn't just disappear. On the night of May 13th, 2008, Brandon did what a lot of college students do. He went to a party. Nothing wild, nothing unusual, just a gathering of friends to celebrate the end of the school year. By all accounts, Brandon didn't drink much. He was careful. He knew he had a drive ahead of him. Around midnight, he decided to head back to his dorm. He never made it. Somewhere along the way, Brandon took a wrong turn. He was driving on rural Minnesota roads, dark, quiet, surrounded by farmland. The kind of roads where everything looks the same at night and
Also, without
during the day.
street with the oh, sorry, I'll let you finish that sentence.
No, you're fine.
I just think it's always a little eerie, I think, on country roads. Obviously,
Mhm.
I grew up north in a, like, a country area. There's no lights. There's no street lights or anything, so it can be hard to see your way around even if you know your way.
Yeah, I mean, remember when we were traveling to Oregon and we
Yes.
had your puppy, Casey 5,
Yeah.
and we had to pull over on dark, deserted roads with the puppy to let him go potty, and I swear to you, that was so scary.
It was. We were heading to Seaside for a little,
Mhm.
like, girls' trip, and, yeah, we had to pull over. I was like, "Autumn," every 2 seconds, I'm like, "Someone's running out with the chainsaw." Like, I just
Right?
know
Like,
it.
every turn, we were like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh."
We had to stop for
When
gas in, like, a tiny little town. I was like, "Oh my god. I hope
Yeah,
we make it."
it was kinda scary. It was kinda scary.
Spoiler alert, we survived.
Yeah, if you couldn't tell.
Okay, sorry.
Eventually, his car went into a ditch. It wasn't a crash, no airbags, no injuries, he just was stuck. Brandon did what most of us would do. He called his parents. Or maybe not most people, I for sure called my parents.
Yeah, I mean, not
Even now,
everybody
I
has
still call my parents.
not everybody has that kind of relationship with their parents, but that would be a natural folks that you
Yes,
would call,
100%. I mean, Lucy, Killian, they would call us.
for sure.
At 1:54 a.m., Brandon called Annette and Brian Swanson. He sounded calm, a little frustrated, sure, but not scared. He told them he was near Lind, Minnesota. The problem was, he wasn't. His parents got in their car and started driving toward where Brandon thought he was.
Hmm.
And for the next 47 minutes, they stayed on the phone. 47 minutes of confidence slowly giving way to confusion. Brandon insisted he could see town lights. He was sure he was close. But as his parents drove around, flashing their headlights, honking, calling out, nothing lined up. They couldn't see him. He couldn't see them. Two realities existing side by side. At some point, Brandon decided to leave his car. He told his parents he was walking toward the lights. They told him to stay put. He didn't. As he walked, the phone stayed connected. They talked about ordinary things, directions, landmarks, gravel roads, fences. Brandon mentioned water. He said he could hear it. His parents were growing increasingly worried. Nothing made sense. And then Brandon said two words: "Oh, shit." And then the line went dead.
That's awful.
Terrifying for his parents.
Yeah, well, yeah.
His parents tried calling back. No answer. They would never hear from him again. Law enforcement was notified immediately. Searches began near Lind, where Brandon believed he was. But days later, Brandon's car was found, not near Lind. It was near Taunton, Minnesota, 25 miles away. Everything Brandon believed that night about where he was going, how close he was to safety, was wrong. The area around Taunton is unforgiving. Fields, ditches, creeks, the Yellow Medicine River, tall grass, mud, water that looks shallow but isn't. If you step wrong, especially in the dark, it doesn't take much. Search teams combed the area. Dogs tracked Brandon's scent to the edge of the river. And then, nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no phone, just silence. Over the years, theories have surfaced. Did Brandon fall into the river? Did he become disoriented, exhausted, hypothermic? Did he stumble into deep water or thick mud? There's no evidence of foul play, no signs that anyone else was there. And sometimes that's the hardest answer to accept. Out of respect for Brandon and his loved ones, speculation for me was intentionally limited because this is a very sensitive case where they're still looking for him.
Sure.
Annette and Brian never stopped looking. They organized searches, returned again and again, walked the land themselves. They know the questions people ask. Why did he leave the car? Why didn't he stay put? But hindsight is cruel. At 20 years old, Brandon believed he was close. He believed he was helping. He believed everything would be fine. What happened to Brandon Swanson isn't cinematic. It's deeply painful and deeply ordinary. A wrong turn, a dark road, a decision made with good intentions, and a moment where help was close, but not close enough. In the years after Brandon disappeared, his case led to real change. In Minnesota, something called Brandon's Law was passed. Before this, adults who went missing were often treated differently than children. Families were sometimes told to wait, to give it time, to assume the person would come back on their own. Brandon's Law changed that. It requires law enforcement in Minnesota to take missing person cases seriously, regardless of age, and to begin a prompt and thorough investigation as soon as a report is made. It also gives families clearer expectations, clearer timelines, and, in theory, fewer moments where loved ones are left feeling unheard or dismissed. It doesn't bring Brandon home, but it means his disappearance mattered enough to protect someone else. Somewhere between confidence and fear, Brandon vanished. He is not just a mystery. He is a son, a student, a voice that went silent mid-sentence. If there's anything to take from his story, it's this. Pay attention to the quiet moments. Trust the people trying to help you. And remember how quickly certainty can disappear in the dark. Brandon Swanson was 20 years old, and he deserves to be remembered. My sources were the Charlie Project, Star Tribune, Wikipedia, KSTP, TB Minnesota, and CNN.
Well, that's really sad.
This case, it's from 2008, and I
Yeah.
have seen it just haunts me because the fact that he thought he was somewhere and his parents came to meet him and they were flashing lights, and no one was seeing anything. He's
Yeah.
still on the phone with them. And, and then the way he ended it was, oh shit.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
To
just,
me, I mean, the theory of him slipping into the river sounds plausible with the "oh shit" thing, especially
right.
with no evidence being left behind after that part of the trail, you
Mhm.
know, it seems plausible, but then even if that river was fast moving or could have taken his body somewhere else or whatever,
I
you'd
feel like it
think
would
that at some
surface by
point
now.
someone would have
Yes,
seen something.
because 'cause it's been 17 years at this point. It's like,
Yeah,
I
and I'm
feel
sure they did checks all
some
in the
sort of
river.
right, and I feel like some sort of evidence would surface because they were looking right away. So, I don't think that it would have been enough time for an animal to eat his body in the river, or it to
No,
decompose, and I feel that if he did, it would resurface, but at the same time, how do
I
we
don't
know?
know. Yeah, we don't know.
It's just a mystery in general, and
But it's pretty impressive that they were able to pass that law because
yes.
so often we see that, a lot of times it's like not until 72 hours that they have
Mhm.
been missing. And that's valuable time for authorities
Exactly.
to try to find people.
Because at their point is that we know our son, and
Hmm.
we're telling you that he needs help. And if they're like, "Well, he's allowed to be missing. He's allowed to disappear. He's an
They're an
adult."
adult. Yeah.
It's like, I understand that, but people need to be heard as well that know people. Like, if I'm a homebody, if I'm out late and I don't come home, there's something wrong with that. I didn't just decide to leave and not come home. I like my house. I like to be
Yeah.
home. People who know me would know I'm not trying to be missing.
Yeah. You weren't out drinking all night and partying,
No.
dancing on
No.
tables.
Dancing on those tables.
But I mean, that's a real thing. I'm just in the, Bodies in the Barrel, the mom kept coming back and saying, "No, I still my daughter's I can't find my daughter. Why won't you find her?" We've seen it
Mhm.
in countless cases where they're like, "No," the families are, like, screaming to be heard, and they're like, "Well, not been 72 hours, and they're an adult, so they probably just left," or, and it's really heartbreaking because they both the investigators are losing that precious time that they could be gathering evidence that can be being trampled over, and the family is left horribly frustrated.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, just crazy. I'm glad that they did pass that law because it does make some sort of sense of it all. Like, not that it was supposed to happen or any of that, but at least some good has come out of it.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, as you know, if you're listening to our current episodes, it just so happens to be February. What's the one holiday that happens that we all remember that happens in February?
My dog's birthday. No, I don't even have a dog. Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. That's what I was getting at. I don't give a shit about President's Day or any of the other things besides Black History Month. Definitely here for that. But
But it's
that
not a holiday.
it's not a holiday. So I am doing a very famous case that takes place on Valentine's Day. And I have not done this one in years past, partly because it's just so freaking famous and I feel like everybody knows all the details of it. However, I have a little update for everyone. So this is going to be a little bit exciting.
Why don't you tell me, my little funny Valentine?
Oh, I am. All right, everyone, here goes. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre. If you lived in Chicago in 1929, you didn't need to read the newspaper to know something was wrong. You could hear it in the crack of the gunfire echoing down the side streets, in the hush that followed, in the way people learned not to look too closely at men in nice suits. And today, we're talking about a crime that didn't just shock Chicago, it captured a nation. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre wasn't the bloodiest crime of the Prohibition era. It wasn't the first mass killing. It wasn't even the most legally complicated. But it felt different because this one happened in the morning, in a garage, in broad daylight. and the killers wore uniforms. Chicago in the 1920s was built on contradictions. It was modern, industrial, flush with immigrants, ambition, and money. And it was soaked, absolutely soaked, in illegal alcohol and gangs. When Prohibition went into effect in 1920, the federal government imagined sobriety. But organized crime saw it as an opportunity. By late 1920s, bootlegging wasn't a shadow business. It was a full-fledged industry. Breweries ran behind false walls. Delivery trucks moved at dawn. Speakeasies multiplied faster than the police could shut them down if they weren't paid off to ignore their existence. At the top of this economy were two men who hated each other deeply. On the South Side, Alphonse Scarface Al Capone. On the North Side, George Bugs Moran. The Chicago Tribune would later write, "The city has become a battlefield, divided by invisible borders, each guarded by men who carry machine guns instead of flags." Capone and Moran were not opposites. They were mirrors. Both controlled liquor routes, both bribed police, both survived assassination attempts. But Capone was flashier. He loved the limelight, and he was treated like a celebrity. People rooted for him. He was a man of the people. Moran was quieter, sharper, more suspicious, and by early 1929, the truce between them was gone. In February, Capone was technically in Florida, which, legally speaking, was very convenient, a perfect alibi. Moran's men operated out of a garage at 2122 North Clark Street, a brick building used as a warehouse for bootleg whiskey. On the morning of Thursday, February 14th, word circulated that a shipment of liquor had arrived. Discounted, high quality, too good to pass up. One by one, Moran's men began to arrive. They were not on high alert. They were not armed for war. They were there to pick up booze. All of them were in their suits, and one even had a red carnation in his lapel, because it was Valentine's Day after all. 7 men would be inside the garage that morning. Their names deserve to be said because history often reduces them to bodies on the floor. Albert Kelichek, Moran's second-in-command and brother-in-law. Adam Hayer, the Northside Gang's bookkeeper and business manager. Albert Weinshank, who managed several cleaning and dyeing operations for Moran. And gang enforcers Frank Gusenberg and brother Peter. 2 non-gang members were also present. Reinhard Schwimmer, a former optician turned gambler who liked to hang around the gang, and John May, an occasional mechanic at the garage. Bugs Moran was supposed to be there as well, but he was running late. According to later testimony, between 10:30 and 10:35 a.m., a black Cadillac pulled up outside the garage. The driver and front seat passenger wore police uniforms, and 2 to 3 men in the back wore civilian clothes. They exited the car and went into the garage. The men were lined up against a brick wall, hands raised, not because they were surrendering, but because they believed they were being arrested. In Prohibition-era 1929 Chicago, that was enough. Raids were part of regular life. What happened next took less than a minute. The men in uniforms stepped aside. 2 others produced Thompson, Tommy submachine guns. Witnesses nearby reported hearing what sounds like construction work followed by rapid popping sounds. 70 shots were fired. The killers then did something chillingly smart. They walked up with their hands up as if escorting prisoners. Neighbors watching from windows believed it was just another police raid. No one intervened. And to be honest, with all the organized crime and knowing this spot was a place for the Northside Gang, people were trained to turn a blind eye. The police arrived minutes later. The scene inside the garage was devastation. Bodies slumped, blood pooling on the concrete. We've all seen that infamous crime scene photo, and it was splashed across the newspapers. And shockingly, one man, Frank Gusenberg, was still alive. He had been shot 14 times. He died 3 hours later, and we're going to have a little bit more on him in a bit. Chicago had seen violence before, but this felt ceremonial, public, intentional, and everyone knew who it was meant for. Even though Bugs Moran wasn't there, everyone had eyes on Al Capone. By noon on February 14th, 1929, Chicago stopped pretending. Newspaper headlines blared. The Chicago Daily Tribune screamed across its front page, 7 dead in gangster raid, machine guns used. Another headline read, police baffled as killers escape in daylight. But they weren't baffled. They were embarrassed. Because everyone, reporters, cab drivers, bartenders, everyone knew exactly what this was. A professional hit, executed cleanly, in police uniforms. And the most unsettling part, it worked. When detectives entered the garage, the smell hit first. Gunpowder, oil, blood. Bodies were arranged almost neatly along the north wall. The coroner later testified the deceased appeared to have been deliberately positioned before the shots were fired. Frank Gusenberg, the only survivor of the day, lingered just long enough to become a legend.
Dang.
14 gunshot wounds, still conscious. Doctors asked who shot him. Police asked who shot him. Reporters hovered. And Gusenberg answered, "Nobody shot me." The Chicago Herald and the Examiner would later call it the final, defiant loyalty of a dying gunman. Or to put it another way, he took it to the grave. Chicago loved that detail. Bugs Moran wasn't dead because he said he was late. And again, that's the reason he said. Moran had been approaching the garage when he spotted what looked like a police car outside, although I was unaware that police drove black Cadillacs.
I was unaware of that as well.
Uh-huh. He ducked into a nearby coffee shop where he sat down and had a nice steamy hot cup of coffee, which is a detail I find interesting. Moments later, the shooting began. Later, he told reporters, quote, "Only Capone kills like that." Which is not technically evidence, but it is branding. In the meantime, Al Capone was in Miami, sunshine, palm trees, undeniable distance. And Capone had witnesses, receipts, hotel records. When reporters tracked him down, he was almost cheerful. He told the Associated Press, "I got nothing to do with this. I was in Florida. Everybody knows that." The mastermind, if there was one, had planned this with legal deniability baked in. Now, here's the part that I find wildly interesting. Ballistics showed military-grade precision, 70 bullets. One officer admitted privately, this wasn't a raid, this was an execution. Publicly, police argued jurisdiction, county versus city, state versus federal. Meanwhile, the killers had vanished. No fingerprints, no weapons, no uniforms, no nothing. Just bullets, blood, and bodies on the ground. National papers piled on. The New York Times wrote, "Chicago stands exposed as a city where criminals rule openly and murder wears a badge." And that line stung. City officials started to scramble. The mayor promised reform. The police commissioner promised arrests. But neither could promise results. The public confidence cracked. This wasn't just gang violence anymore. It was a spectacle, and they got away with it. For the first time, the entire country was watching Chicago ask a question it didn't like the answer to. What do you do when a crime looks more organized than law enforcement? And looming over all of it was one name spoken in every newsroom: Al Capone. With the country looking for answers, Washington takes notice. Within days, federal officials were quietly dispatched to Chicago. The New York Herald Tribune wrote, "The massacre has forced the federal government to confront what local authorities have failed to contain." That's polite language for this is embarrassing and someone has to do something.
Mhm.
Clearly, the system was corrupt. Organized crime owned police, judges, prosecutors, and political heads. Now, at the time of the massacre, J. Edgar Hoover was not yet the untouchable myth. He was ambitious, image conscious, and deeply aware that this case could define federal authority. And he was out to make a name for himself. One of the most haunting details that remained were the uniforms. Witnesses described 2 men dressed as police and 2 to 3 men in civilian coats. Police departments across Chicago checked records. No officers were missing uniforms. No cars were unaccounted for, meaning the uniforms were either stolen, borrowed, or custom made. And suddenly, implication landed. Anyone could be the police, which did wonders for public trust. Attention then turned to the east, to Detroit, specifically the Purple Gang, a Jewish bootlegging organization known for extreme violence and cross-city hits. The theory was simple. Capone wanted plausible deniability. Outsiders wouldn't be recognized. Detroit muscle could disappear cleanly. Informants whispered names, and one name came up again and again: Fred Killer Burke. Fred Burke was everything investigators hated. He was careful, mobile, and quiet. Months later, Burke would accidentally expose himself, not through testimony, but through stupidity. In March 1929, in St. Joseph, Michigan, Burke was involved in a traffic accident that turned deadly. Police searched his home. Inside, they found 2 Thompson submachine guns, ammunition, and bullet casings. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. Ballistics tests later showed that those guns matched the bullets used in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. And Autumn, this becomes the very first time that ballistics testing was ever used.
Wow.
I know. I didn't know that fact.
No, that's great. I did not know that.
Now we all do. Finally, they had evidence. Finally, they had a break. And yet, Frank would go missing for close to a year after that. He went on the run. True crime publications were all the rage back then, and Frank Killer Burke was featured often for his crimes. A man recognizes the description and picture of Burke in True Crime magazine, which kind of wish still existed. And he looked shockingly like his next door neighbor. So he called the police, and sure enough, they find Burke hiding in a farmhouse in Missouri. He was taken into custody without any trouble. Eventually, Burke was convicted, but not for the massacre. He was sentenced to life in prison for a different murder, one where he killed a police officer. Investigators were more interested in convicting him of that because he killed one of their own than convicting him of the sensational St. Valentine's Day massacre, where 7 men died. And even though they had a ballistics match, no witnesses could place Burke inside the garage, and no one would testify. The massacre remained officially unsolved. The guns went into evidence, and the case went cold. So, there are a few theories. Frank Burke did the killings either for himself or at the request of Al Capone. That Bugs Moran actually ordered the hit on his own men, since he was the one that said we should all meet up, and then he sat across the street having a cup of coffee while the murder took place. And a few of the men that were killed were known for being very unruly in his gang. And here's the one that gets me, and this is the one that I didn't know. The last theory comes from modern years. In 2010, Al Capone biographer Jonathan Eeg found a letter in the FBI archives that had never surfaced before. It had been written in 1935, 6 years after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It was addressed to the FBI's young director, J. Edgar Hoover, from Frank Farrell. And he tells Hoover if he wants to solve this massacre, then he needs to look at the fatal shooting of William Davert. He was the son of a police officer. In November 1928, he was in a North Side pub known for being a gang hangout, and he got into a bar fight with some men from Bugs Moran's crew. He was then found beaten, shot, and left for dead. However, he managed to make it to a fireman's call box and was taken to the hospital. He managed to live for several weeks after that, but he doesn't tell anyone who shot him, except, according to this letter, he tells his cousin named William White, more commonly known as Three Finger Jack, a lifelong, I know, great name, right? A lifelong criminal in Chicago, and he knew all the players in the North Side gang. He was also known for having a terrible temper and deep family loyalty. Apparently, that is when he swore he was going to get vengeance. He not only knew the gang, but he knew several crooked cops, and that included the father of his cousin who had just died. The theory is that he paid for uniforms or had exact replicas made, and that he also paid someone to summon the men and Moran to the garage. The very garage that Three Finger Jack had done business with the Moran gang before. I think when you look at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, it is brutal, but it feels intentional. With the group of men that were there, some were part of the gang, some were known to just hang out with gang members. The 70 bullets, the planning, it felt like a message trying to be sent. It would also make sense why the police eventually seemed to drop it, even with ballistic evidence. They had killed a policeman's son, after all. Hoover didn't act on this tip about Three Finger Jack. And some suspect it's because it turns out that Three Finger Jack was an informant for the FBI, and the other information they were getting was just too valuable to arrest him for killing some gangsters when he could keep giving them more evidence. This theory makes sense to me, especially when the men were in nice suits. Would they really be unloading a truck in these clothes? Or is it because they thought they were having a meeting with their mob boss? The St. Valentine's Day Massacre changed the rules, not because it was unprecedented, because it was undeniable. This wasn't a back alley shooting. It wasn't a drunken dispute. It wasn't even framed as self-defense. It was a public execution. The Chicago Evening Post wrote, "The city has tolerated lawlessness for years. It may not survive it." That sentence landed hard because suddenly respectable people were scared. And when respectable people get scared, governments respond, and the FBI took action. Before the massacre, Al Capone was a joke you laughed at nervously. A flashy man who could cover his atrocities by paying for soup kitchens and waving money around. After this, he was a problem. The image shifted almost overnight. The New York Daily News ran a cartoon depicting Capone as a butcher, apron-stained, machine guns hanging like tools. Editorials stopped flirting with admiration. One columnist wrote, "There's nothing romantic left in Chicago's gangsters, only accounting books and coffins." Now 4 years go by, and it seems like it was just over. But then new evidence comes to light. A man came forward saying he knows that Frank Burke was the gunman. I mean, don't we all know? We saw the ballistics, right?
Yes.
Just saying. But he said he knew that because he was the lookout on the day of the massacre, and that the hit had been ordered then none other than Al Capone. The claim immediately makes headlines, but the story had holes in it. Too many holes, and it turns out the man was actually just trying to trade information for a reduced sentence. In addition to his story, two of the men that he said that were there had airtight alibis. So, no. Ultimately, they don't act on these new allegations. So, after nearly a century, the St. Valentine's Day massacre remains unsolved. No convictions, no courtroom reckoning, but history is not confused. The ballistics were confirmed, or they just couldn't prove it. And that, in many ways, is the point. The massacre became shorthand for prohibition failure, for gangsters' excess, for corruption wearing a badge. It inspired books, films, shows, documentaries, podcasts, endless retellings. But something important always gets lost. 7 men died in that garage because they trusted uniforms, and that detail still chills. Frank Burke dies in prison of a heart attack. Three Finger Jack was shot and killed in 1934. Al Capone was convicted of tax evasion, then died after a battle with syphilis, a stroke, and ultimately cardiac arrest. Bugs Moran ended up living longer than all of them. He also ended up penniless and jailed for a string of robberies. He died in Leavenworth Prison of lung cancer. 7 men died on Valentine's Day 1929. Some were violent, some were criminals, and some were simply adjacent to organized gang members. Their names are often reduced to a list, or worse, a footnote. And the question still remains, was this a crime committed by the police as a revenge for a police officer's son's murder? Or a calculated mob hit ordered by Al Capone? Or even Bugs Moran on his own gang? We will never know. And no one will ever tell because, as the old saying goes, snitches get stitches. My sources were the Chicago Tribune during the February to March 1929 coverage, the Chicago Daily Archives, the New York Times reporting on the massacre and federal response, the coroner's inquest testimony, Cook County, the United States versus Al Capone 1931 court records, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's historical files, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre by William Helmer, Capone, the Man and the Era by Lawrence Bergreen, and the History Channel show History's Greatest Mysteries. What's your
I
theory?
I I don't really have one. What's your theory?
My theory is I think that it might have been Three Finger Jack. I think that makes sense to me because it's either I don't think Al Capone did it, which is crazy, but because there was those 2 random guys there that were not part of the gang, it doesn't make sense that you would you aren't that's not gonna hurt Bugs Moran if you kill these 2 randos, right?
Right.
That just seems weird that because each one of them were summoned. So, it doesn't make sense to me that Al Capone would kill these randos to hurt Bugs Moran. It would make sense if they were hanging out with the Northside Gang and maybe they were bothering Bugs Moran or a part of his operation and he killed
Uh-huh.
them. That part could make sense.
Right.
But also and his whole thing that these cops pulled up in a black Cadillac, I don't believe that for a second. And so I went and had a coffee, and then the shooting happened. I don't believe any of that from Bugs.
Right. Right. No, me either.
But this theory that Three Finger Jack had his cousin killed brutally by this group of gangsters at the bar. Well, the one guy that was there was a gambler. The other one just hung out around the gang. So, and they kind of wanted to be, they were wannabes. That's what it is. It's the pick me guys, right? So, would they have joined in beating this guy and leaving him for dead? Probably. So, the fact that all of those ones specifically were there and that they all weren't within the organization makes me think it could be Three Finger Jack and that Three Finger Jack hired Burke because obviously Burke for sure was the one who shot them, they did the ballistics match, which I just find fascinating. They had a scientist come in and because there's no forensic teams back then, the
Right.
scientist come in and he goes, "You know what? I bet you if you shoot a bullet out of this gun, it will leave distinct markings and we could tell if it was shot from the same gun." It's
That's
wild.
so wild.
Right? They had never done that before. So this was the very first case that ballistics were used on, and I did not know that fact. I also did not know about that letter that was found in 2010. So that's why I said this is an updated case because those are facts that I wasn't aware of and facts that I don't know that everybody knows that with that letter. But I mean, the letter seems plausible to me. That's the theory that I stick with the most in this. Again, it's just a theory. But clearly, Frank Burke was the one that shot them. We know that. It was his Tommy gun. We have that confirmed. We're all aware of that. But I believe he was hired by Three Finger Jack. And that's the tea.
That is I'm in shock.
I know. I feel like I know this case. It's wildly famous. The photos of them, on the ground is just I mean, we've all seen it. We've all seen the pile of bodies and the blood all over, and it's not like any of it was censored. They just plastered dead bodies on the covers of the newspapers and stuff. So we've all seen the photos of it. It's not like we haven't. And it's not like I didn't know all the characters in play, like Al Capone and Bugs Moran, like all of that stuff I was well aware of. But, I really didn't and I've seen documentaries, but I don't think I ever did, like, a deep dive on it, and I hadn't seen any of the newer I mean, I say newer, 2010, but still, newer information. So I thought it was really interesting, and I was blown away to find out this was the very first case they used ballistics on. I was just like, "Oh, shit. Wow, okay." So, I was excited to do it, and I just wanna wish everyone a very happy Valentine's Day from
Oh
me.
my gosh. Yeah. A happy fact, like, if we're talking about, like, holiday murders and stuff,
Oh.
and this isn't a happy fact, actually,
I was
let's take
like,
that
"What are
out.
you talking about that's happy?"
It's not a happy fact, I meant fun fact.
Now I'm terrified to see what your happy fact is. Maybe we'll do a happy fact of the week with Autumn.
My god. Yes, so now I'm gonna say this is really, really crazy, and I'm actually gonna cover this case soon, but it's
Okay.
the Jonestown Massacre.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my poor parents were married that day.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Their anniversary is November 18th, the
Never
same
forget.
year. But, I mean, and they're still together, so it's been, oh my gosh, almost 50 years that they've been married, almost.
That's
So
just but what a day to share it with.
right? So, I mean, obviously, that wasn't the best, but it just reminded me that
Well, they weren't
that
serving Kool-Aid, right?
oh my god,
If you
they
tell me they served
did. No, kidding.
no, you're ridiculous.
I wasn't there, I don't know.
And that was your happy fact with Autumn.
Yeah, so ending it on that note, oh my gosh.
Yep. I'm gonna make you do a happy fact every week now, just so you're aware. Autumn's gonna have happy facts, and who knows what they're going to be.
No, not even Erin, she does not know.
No. So, if you are new to our podcast, do go back and listen to the older episodes. We have plenty for you to go through. If you are not a follower of ours on Instagram, go to Instagram where we're at Murder Not Murdering, and we are going to post pictures so you get to know these people that were involved in these crimes that we're speaking about. We're also on TikTok at mnm.pod. If you do have a case you'd like us to cover, please slide into our DMs and we will do our very best to get back to you on that. And I want to wish everybody, like I said, a happy Valentine's Day. Drink some Kool-Aid, spend some time with your loves or your
Drink some
galentines or your
Kool-Aid.
bros. And that was a happy facts from
Mhm.
Erin.
Happy facts from Erin, got it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. New episodes are always out on Mondays, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.